All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everybody? Mike Kadlick and Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode of the Patriots Daily podcast, powered by Prize Picks and powered by Game Time. Head over to Prize Picks, use code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play $5. And head over to Game Time and use code CLNS. You will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We'll talk about those guys later, especially Game Time, with it being a game week and the fact that the Patriots actually play meaningful regular season football this coming Sunday. So we'll look at those ticket prices a little bit later on. But first, Taylor, we're going to take an overarching look at the entire 2025 Patriots season. We'll look at some reasons for optimism for this team in their first season under Mike Vrabel. And then we'll look at the other side, the more negative side, and for reasons to potentially be concerned. Figure we'll go back and forth with each topic that we kind of mulled over earlier and go from there. So I guess we could start with defensive line depth. We talk about guys like Milton Williams, Christian Barmore. That is obviously a reason to be excited. What do these guys bring to the table, in your opinion, and why? Again, I guess, why is this not a concern? Why is this a positive for this Patriots team?
Well, obviously, Christian Barmore and Milton Williams. It does need to be acknowledged that Christian Barmore, he has slimmed down. We need to see him back at 100%, but he had a strong summer. We also haven't seen him in games yet, but by all indications, he's going to have another dominant season. Milton Williams, still need to see what he's going to give them in run defense, but he is living up to his contract so far as a pass rusher. That should be one of the best defensive tackle combos in the league, if not the best. They're making enough money, so you're hoping that they're able to get there. Then behind them, Kyrus Tonga, nose tackle, a guy that we only expected to be really more of a space-eating run stopper, and he's actually showing some pass rush upside. So it makes me even more confident in some of their, not just 5 down fronts where you've got Barmore and Milton Williams kind of on the guards or tackles, and then Tonga inside, but also when they're 4 down fronts. So Tonga can be that nose tackle guy, and you're not necessarily giving up everything in terms of pass rush. He's not only eating space, he can also create some disruption as well. I also like the youth that they have. Joshua Farmer was really good against the run this preseason. I don't know if he's necessarily nimble enough to be a consistently effective pass rusher, but he's got a good bull rush, and I think that he can be effective picking guys on line games. And even Eric Gregory, a guy that we asked Mike Vrabel about, he said, hey, you always want young, long, versatile defensive linemen. He was somebody apparently they were thinking about during the draft process, and now that they were able to claim him from the Bengals, and the Bengals really liked him. They actually initially paid the 53. They cut him to make room for a guard. I think it was, do you remember who it was?
Dalton Risner.
Yeah, Dalton Risner.
Signed last week, yeah.
Yeah, trying to get him back on the team, and the Patriots swooped in. So that, to me, helped round out the group. Jeremiah Farms, I think, is solid as a guy who can play all of the interior positions. He's pretty quick off the ball, even though he's technically late off the ball a lot, but he's quick at actually, getting off once the ball is snapped and he realizes, and he's got good hands. So I like him kind of rounding out that room, but I like it better that they have the 2 young developmental guys to kind of back up Tonga, Barmore, and Milton Williams. Then on the edges, I think I'm higher on the edge position than a lot of people are, maybe league-wide. Obviously, we know K'Lavon Chaisson earned a starting job, kind of kicked Keon White down to being that 3rd edge defender. He's a very well-rounded player, showed that towards the end of the year against the Raiders, who he's going to play his old team this weekend. And even Raiders fans, kind of similar to Eric Gregory, they weren't happy when they lost K'Lavon Chaisson. They were hoping the Raiders were actually going to bring him back. So I'm excited to see what he can do in a full-time role after a really strong summer. Harold Landry, after all the speculation over whether he can still get after the passer, we saw it this summer. He's more than capable of still getting after the passer and stopping.
So damn fast.
The explosiveness made me more worried about Morgan Moses, where you're like, oh,
yeah,
I think you're still fast, but Moses is having some trouble. So, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think you have 2 edge defenders who can play every single down if they need to. Obviously, Keon White being a backup is huge. I'm hoping they use him on the interior still, like Barmore and Milton Williams over the guards, and then you have Keon stood up over a center. I think kind of like in that Micah Parsons role.
Yeah.
I think that's how you maximize him and keep it from just having him as a developmental edge as he's still learning. And then Elijah Ponder, I'm very high on him and what he can bring to this defense and special teams, actually. He's another guy who I think can develop into an every down player. And even on the practice squad, having Braden Swinson, a guy who they cut, everyone was worried, including us, are you going to lose this guy? It's fine. It's back on the practice squad. Nobody claimed him. So I I think just top to bottom, it's you got your starters that you're pretty confident in, even if the edges lack like a Pro Bowler or a potential Pro Bowler like the defensive tackle spot does. But again, they have quality every down players and a lot of developmental depth behind them at defensive tackle and on the edge. So that's why, to me, that's probably the thing I'm most excited about this season, even more so than, somebody we're going to get to later.
100%. And they're for sure going to be disruptive. I think they're too deep at that position to, not just be able to even like churn guys out and give guys rest and get guys out there. Like the rotation of, again, Keon White being sort of a backup now to be able to fill a void, move him around the formation, like you mentioned, use him as sort of a jack of all trades type guy around the front to put pressure basically everywhere across the board. That's exciting. And then the Eric Gregory thing too, you mentioned it, but like, when I tweeted out the Patriots transaction of him, I had so many Bengals fans and reporters like quoting and responding to my tweet like, "Oh God, like dang it, the Bengals lost this guy. Like they really liked him." Those are the types of claims that you like to see. Like there was, again, it didn't
kind
really.
Like Jalen Roy last year.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like there was like a handful of waiver claims the Patriots made a couple years ago. It might have been the last year of the Belichick era where they brought in. Alex Austin, who has turned into, a high quality player here. Even like Nathan Rourke was not like a big one, but he had that decent preseason. They ended up getting a claim for him and they kind of worked him in as a backup there. There were a handful of guys that, turned out to be decent contributors to this team. Marco Wilson was another one on the back end for the Pats. So like being able to use those waiver claims. And I know it's super early with Gregory, but to see, okay, he has had a good summer elsewhere. They just couldn't make it work, and the Patriots swoop in. That's exciting. And obviously you have Chase on, which was a similar breadth from Raiders fans as well. But on the other side here, talking about a reason for concern, Taylor, we'll stay in the trenches, but we'll go to the offensive side of the ball. You have here offensive line age spectrum. So obviously Will Campbell, left tackle, rookie. Other side, Morgan Moses, aging veteran who was dealing with whether it was a ramp up, whether it was injury, we're not entirely sure. But this is clearly still a weak spot on the Patriots roster, and it has been now for several seasons.
You can also add in Jared Wilson, another rookie on the left side, and Garrett Bradbury, who is another aging veteran. Morgan Moses isn't just aging. That's a 34-year-old man. And while like you can look at guys like Trent Williams, who we know mentored Morgan Moses when he was younger, Morgan Moses seems like a guy who takes good care of his body. As we've mentioned, he hasn't missed more than 14 games in any recent years. So while you can't expect he's going to miss some time, and you hope that Marcus Bryant can fill in adequately, you're still relying on completely different ends of that age spectrum outside of Mike Nwenu, who's right about in the sweet spot. But like I said, Will Campbell and Jared Wilson is athletic and intelligent and adaptable as they might be. These are still first-year players in the NFL going up against a pretty tough Raiders defensive line. Like Tyree Wilson has been kicking inside for the Raiders and actually looked very good. So like we're just talking week one, they're going to have their hands full. There's a lot of good defensive lines on their schedule, especially in the AFC East, as we know. So that kind of worries me, just what that learning curve is going to look like when you have two rookies that are next to each other. And Morgan Moses, yeah, he might miss games, but also what's he going to look like on the field? Because as we just mentioned with Harold Landry, at times this summer, you did see Morgan Moses really struggle with speed. There was one day in Minnesota, he got beat really badly like 3 or 4 times in one practice and would have given up like multiple sacks. And it kind of got me thinking, I'm confident in what he can be as a run blocker. On the right side, it's a little bit easier to cover those guys up. But like with the game on the line, at some point, you just got to kick back and win initial contact and give your quarterback a chance. I just wonder whether or not the older guys, especially Bradbury, who I've mentioned, I think at this point in his career, he's more of a spot starter than someone who should be on the field every snap of every game. So can the old guys hold up, and will the young guys be able to adapt quickly enough that it's not just a massive target on the entire left side of the line, knowing you already have trouble in the middle and could potentially have it on the right edge, completely depending on Morgan Moses' health and where he is at this stage in his career.
Would you... But I forget when and if we talked about this fully, but I think it might have been last week in one of our live shows. But would you prefer to start a Ben Brown as the full-time center and have Bradbury be a backup / spot starter? Or like, is he, in your opinion, more consistent than a Bradbury right now? Or are they kind of in a spot where because they brought in the veteran in Bradbury, who was sort of deemed their starter, they're kind of forced into playing them even if they might not want to?
I think Bradbury's going to have to lose the job, but I would probably prefer Ben Brown just because I think he's more consistent in pass protection. He's not great. Like neither one of those, you don't want either one of these guys having to block guys one-on-one consistently. And I also think that I've mentioned this before, but Garrett Bradbury and Morgan Moses, both guys that are plus run blockers. This entire offensive line is pretty stacked when it comes to running the ball, as well as, the rookies can make sure they're on the same page. They're not missing assignments. That was an issue for Jared Wilson early in the preseason before he kind of started to figure it out and began to see the whole field. He said things slowed down for him a bit. He did miss some, but as long as they're all on track, like they should be able to run the ball at will against most people they face. But yeah, I think Ben Brown would hurt that ability. He did flash on outside zone, but downhill, I just don't think he gets a lot of push or is really capable of standing his ground consistently. So you're trading off if you do have Ben Brown in the lineup. But as I've mentioned in other shows, my nightmare is Garrett Bradbury getting walked back and Drake Maye falling through and like hurting his hand because his center can't anchor down before he's already in the quarterback's lap.
So, I was debating on how I wanted to pivot this because you mentioned the running backs, but then you just mentioned the quarterbacks, or the quarterback and Drake Maye rather, and both of those are two of our reasons for optimism. So we will start with the quarterback. Now, if he can stay healthy, he can stay protected with this offensive line in front of him. I think we're all excited about what Drake Maye can be and sort of the trajectory he is on heading into his second year. Josh McDaniels as his OC. But what have you seen from Drake this preseason that makes you optimistic, not pessimistic, about where he's at? And can he ultimately turn in, not just an okay second season, but, one that we can really stand on to be like, okay, this is our quarterback for the future, and here's why.
Well, I know that Jeff Howe of The Athletic recently had a report that said the Patriots are really excited about Drake Maye and his trajectory this season. That's part of the reason that this landed on the list, because there was like a week where I was a little bit worried. Drake Maye has been inconsistent in end of game or end of half situations this summer. That was concerning me because we know that was an issue going back to last year. And also, while Drake has done a pretty great job protecting the ball this summer, there were also some moments kind of later in the, especially in training camp, where things got a little bit loosey-goosey. And the accuracy, I think that's just something we're going to have to eat. I hope that he can kind of get that figured out some point this season. That's very tough. Like, you're not really fixing your mechanics in season. So maybe as he gets older, but you're just hoping there aren't a ton of those spray misses where you're not sure whether he's throwing it away or trying to hit somebody, especially over the middle, because we know how dangerous that is. But other than that, I mean, considering everything we know about this Josh McDaniels offense, how complicated it can be, how all the post-snap adjustments, all those things we always talk about, it seems like a good fit for Drake, the way he sees the field, the way he wants to play football. And when Drake understands what he's seeing for the most part, you see he's decisive. The ball comes out on time. When he does have to hold on to it, he keeps his eyes downfield to try to remain a passer as long as he possibly can before he tucks it and just decides to take off. And especially like against man coverage we saw in the preseason, he's like, all right, well, if you're just going to drop back and no one's looking at me, I'm going to take off and score touchdowns or rip off a bunch of yards against you. So I am excited to see what he can do, and I feel like there will be a significant step forward for Drake. And in this offense, I think that should escalate him into the top half of the league, because in this offense with a lot of offensive weapons, people might laugh at weapons, but really I think they have a good diversity of skill sets, which I'll kind of touch on later, for him to be able to spread the ball around. And I think Josh is also going to do a good job of facilitating him getting the ball out quickly, not having to hold on to it and put the offensive line in compromising positions. So there will definitely be things about Drake Maye's game that we need to look at with the magnifying glass, make sure that he's showing signs of improvement, even if it's not necessarily linear. But for the most part, I was impressed with what I saw this summer, especially from a mental perspective, and his ability to get better at protecting the ball, maintaining being a passer when he gets out of the pocket, and just consistently making good decisions. All
right, we will talk about a couple more reasons for optimism, a couple more reasons for concern in just a second. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks, because this episode of Patriots Daily is brought to you by PrizePicks, and preseason football just ended. College football is here last weekend, and regular season is officially here. So don't miss out on any of the action this season over at PrizePicks. The league's best are in action starting as soon as this Thursday. Guys like Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb will all be on the field Thursday night to open the season. And we will have a PrizePicks lineup here at CLNS to get you through it. It is simple to play. You just have to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. The PrizePicks app puts their members first, so all withdrawals are safe, fast, and secure. And they also offer Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And all you have to do is download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, use code CLNS and you will get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Shout out Prize Picks. As you guys know, they are the presenting sponsor of Patriots Daily. And football is here, so we'll be jam-packed with lineups. Taylor and I will have lineups before every single game here on the podcast. We will also have game day lineups, and I'll have you rolling with Thursday Night Football, Sunday night, and Monday night too. Follow along, get in on the action. Use that code CLNS for $50 in lineups after you play $5. And while I did just sound super optimistic about winning money on the Prize Picks app, we do unfortunately have to go for a reason for concern for the Patriots team here on the pessimistic side, and it is the cornerback health. As we know, it is week 1 right now, and we are trending in the opposite direction that we wanted to with Christian Gonzalez. His hamstring injury does not seem like it's going according to plan, and it doesn't sound like, frankly, he is going to play week 1. We'll see what happens, but overall, it's not just week 1 where the health is concerned. It's kind of the entire season. And I'll let you explain why. Why are you concerned about the health of the cornerback room?
Well, for Christian Gonzalez, the fact that he missed all of training camp is concerning. He already is dealing with a hamstring injury, but we know that players, especially skilled players, where you're running around a lot at full speed, have a history, or just you tend to deal with some type of soft tissue injuries throughout the season. So like you said, it's not just week 1 or maybe the first few weeks. How is this going to linger throughout the season as he continues to miss more time and doesn't really get a chance to really get used to football again and get in football shape, as we call it, because you're throwing him right into games. Right. And then we have Carlton Davis, who I understand he was on a plan like Morgan Moses, but there were also times where we saw trainers like working on his lower leg, and there were times where it did seem kind of odd that he was missing practice or that he was being held out of early sessions. And this
really worked Carlton Davis in this summer. Like we didn't really hear much, and we'll see if there's an injury on the report on, tomorrow when we get it, but like there was something there, whether it was just being cautious. You mentioned it when they first signed him, when we did our live show in March. Like he's had some injury history, and you clearly saw it early on this season.
And there's like some random ones. Like last year, he broke his jaw, right? I'm not going to call the guy fragile because he broke his jaw. Right. But he does. Like every season, it is something. And he's a 28-year-old corner who's got a lot of tread on his tires. Like this is, like you said, this is the signing that's worried me the most. When you pay a guy that much, I don't like seeing him sitting out as much as he has. And I think it feels like it's almost a guarantee that he's going to miss time. So it's one thing if it was, okay, Carlton Davis is out, but you have Christian Gonzalez. If Christian Gonzalez is in and out of the lineup, and so is Carlton Davis, your starting cornerback room is probably, or, not necessarily starting, but your room is going to end up being Marcus Jones, Alex Austin, and DJ James. And I will say, all of those guys had good summers. Marcus Jones was just voted a captain, someone that we thought might get phased out because he doesn't fit the typical mold of a Mike Vrabel cornerback, but had himself a very competitive summer. Alex Austin showed out in the slot, so he's adding more versatility and value on top of what he already had. I think his route recognition looks like it's really improved, and you could see it in the preseason and in training camp. And DJ James, I keep saying competitive, but him too. Like there was never a day where it felt like DJ James was just getting picked on. If you kept throwing at him, eventually he was going to break something up and make a play of his own. So you don't hate that necessarily being your cornerback room for like a game or two against the right matchups. But also if you're playing like the Panthers, I don't feel very good about that because they've got, now they don't really have Jalen Coker, which is one way the Patriots kind of got bailed out there. But you know what I'm saying? If you face a stacked receiving core, it's a lot more intimidating, especially when you're going into the season thinking you're going to have one of the best cornerback rooms in the NFL. And that's before I even talk about Marcus Jones having an injury history of his own. He's been available. I don't want to jinx him or anything like that, but you have to take his history into consideration. So, yeah, the cornerback room looks real good on paper, but when you apply reality and the fact that some of these guys – tend to get hurt for one reason or another, it feels like things could shift very quickly for this unit. And it might force you to have to start using like safeties at slot corner in man coverage situations, maybe more than you want to. And that's just never ideal. So I really, it's right under offensive line, just having young guys, then very old guys as being something that I'm very worried about for the outlook of this season.
Well, on the other end, and I had this written down wrong originally, but that is the concern on the defensive side of the football. Our second, actually, reason for optimism, though, on defense is the linebacker room with Robert Spillane, Christian Ellis kind of manning it. Obviously, Jelani Tavai on the short-term IR. We'll see what happens when he comes back. But again, there is at least upside on this unit. So while, cornerback might be dicey, and we'll talk about safety in a second with what's happened there, there's at least some optimism in the front end, in the front seven with the defensive line and the linebackers. Why are you more optimistic in the linebackers? Even though I think we talked about it last week where at one point the depth at linebacker, or at least the upside, for lack of a better term, felt great. And I mentioned that preseason ranking that PFF had where, they were up there with teams like the Eagles, but kind of slowed down a little bit this summer. But, again, there is the upside there. So where are you at on linebacker, and why do you think it is a strength of this team?
So obviously you start with Robert Spillane, who is not a perfect player. He's a very average athlete, but he makes up for that by making very few mistakes, typically being where the ball is at, and also just having great instincts and being able to make plays on the ball in the passing game, which for most linebackers of his skill set, like you're thinking of a Juwan Bentley, you don't think they're going to make plays on the ball, but you do expect them to get depth, come down, tackle, and just minimize risk. So Robert Spillane is one reason I think this will just be a very sound unit. I know people have said, well, what happens when he goes down? If he goes down, which, would kind of buck history. He's been very consistent on the field. But Jack Gibbons is in a similar mold, but he's a step down where I don't think he's quite as instinctive, where he can get to the ball as quickly and be as productive making plays on it. But for the most part, he can get the defense lined up, do all those things. He's got starting experience and is a good run defender, even if you don't love him on the field against the pass. But where the real upside in this room is for me is one Christian Ellis, a guy who can cover, he can defend the run, he can blitz. Still very much growing and developing, but I like his upside. And whether or not he's an every down starter, I do think he's got a skill set that you can work with, especially in this defense. We saw it, again, in training camp and in the preseason. His ability to just fire into gaps and make plays behind the line of scrimmage, I think, is going to be very useful for this defense. But really, the big guy for me is Marte Mapu. I was very skeptical about him, especially the run defense. I've been very vocal about it. Thought that he would have been a really bad fit as a run defender at linebacker in Bill Belichick's system. But this defense, where it's a lot more aggressive and the linebackers kind of flow to the ball versus being the Juwan Bentley types where you got to just stick your hand in guys' chests and throw them off you, I think he's grown. When one of the first things he mentioned about when he found out he was going to be a linebacker was he wanted to work on getting off blocks. I think he's done that. The range that he has is something they just do not have at linebacker. I think he could be a future starter for them. I really do. And that's why I think the upside for them is so high, because I think that Marte Mapu has dynamic potential. And then on top of that, Jelani Tavai is on short-term injured reserve. If he comes back, that's a guy where they still run a 3-4, so you can see a role for him on the edge still. Mike Vrabel talked about both his versatility in the kicking game and on defense. And Jelani Tavai is still a good linebacker. People forget how many passes he got his hands on the year before last year, which obviously wasn't really helped by coaching or his scheme, put him in a lot of tough positions. But Jelani Tavai is a good player as long as he's surrounded by other guys who are complementary. So as long as he can come back and be a contributor on this unit, that's where I really think it comes together. We have a lot of different skill sets you can kind of throw out there and match whatever the defense or the offense is rather representing.
All right, well, I teased it in the last transition, so let's just get to it right here, right now. Safety, a position group on this team that Bill Belichick once called one of the better starting duos in the NFL, and Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers. They had a great season, in his last year, which was 2-3 years ago at this point now, which is crazy. But time's flying. Bill's now at Chapel Hill, getting his doors blown off by TCU. That's a subject for another day. But that was a tough showing by Bill at UNC. But regardless, back to the safety room. Duggar, Peppers, good players there. And now they're both essentially not in the starting lineup. Jabril Peppers cut last Friday. Kyle Duggar has essentially been demoted. Patriots just released their unofficial depth chart for week 1. Craig Woodson, Jalen Hawkins are the starting safeties. So they're inexperienced. There's uncertainty in the room for sure. Kyle Duggar now, resorts to a backup. Del Pettis, someone who I know you're a fan of in the room, but when you look at the safety room and how quickly it's transitioned off of what they were a few years ago, why are you concerned about it? And do you think it could develop into a real problem early and then also even down the stretch of the season?
So I don't know that safety is going to be a problem because I do think that Craig Woodson has playmaking potential. I think that Jalen Hawkins is going to do a good job of just limiting mistakes. And I'm not sure he's somebody that will get exposed. I just don't think he's of the playmaking ilk of a Kyle Duggar or Jabril Peppers if they're healthy. This room really is going to depend on whether or not Kyle Duggar can actually contribute. And on paper, if he continues to get healthy and he's comfortable in the defensive scheme, he's a great fit for what they want to do, I think. And we already saw that in the preseason, like especially in the deep part of the field. I thought him being in the right places, being able to capitalize when the ball was in his area, I liked seeing those things. So if he can overtake one of Woodson or Hawkins and become a starter, that's where I feel a lot better about this unit. Because you lose Jabril Peppers, that stinks. But I still think with what Craig Woodson gives you and the solidness of a Jalen Hawkins, that's three guys that work pretty well together, especially in some of those bigger nickel or dime packages. And Del Pettis, I love his physicality. Really good when it comes to getting downhill and closing to the ball carrier. He's a special teamer, so he takes good pursuit angles and generally doesn't miss tackles unless it's like big guys. We saw that against the Giants where there were a couple of times he had to tackle tight ends that were much bigger and struggled there. But in terms of man coverage, he does do a pretty good job against tight ends in terms of being right on their hip and being able to contest throws. So it's not even that I think this is a bad position group, but I just don't know what it's going to look like because – again, Jalen Hawkins is okay, but Craig Woodson is a rookie, and we have no idea what Kyle Duggar's trajectory is going to be when he's back to facing starters. So I have too many question marks to be confident in this position group, but I am cautiously optimistic, even though it is technically one of my reasons for concern.
All right, well, we go from a not so deep position group on the defense at safety to one of the deepest on the team, and it is running back. You got Ramondre Stevenson as the starter. Again, according to the unofficial depth chart, Antonio Gibson is the backup. Travion Henderson, the third string guy. Now, don't think that's going to be the case, but if it is, that means you have one of the most promising rookie offensive players in football, second-round pick Henderson as your third running back. Now, again, I think he's going to be sort of a 1A, 1B with Ramondre in this offense, and they'll use Antonio as their spell guy. But regardless, it's a deep position. And for an offense that we have questions about along the offensive line, even the receiver room, which we'll get to in a little while. Running back is one that, again, upward trajectory, one that you feel like you can rely on for this Patriots team. So what are you looking for out of this room this year? And how can they use it to their advantage to make the offense really go?
Yeah, so obviously Travion, he might be their best offensive weapon. The fact that he can catch passes out of the backfield, he can split out wide and just go deep and punish linebackers, which is a very scary proposition, especially for the Raiders this week. And then the fact that as a running back as well, it's not just outside zone, it's not just tosses. He can actually work between the tackles as well. And Elliott Wolf said he was impressed by that. That was one area where I thought he was kind of inconsistent. I thought he was better behind pulling guards where you get the lane. You also get him a lead blocker, and he can work behind that guy and get the space. I've been impressed with what I've seen from him. And obviously, like him and Ramondre Stevenson are elite pass blockers. And then with Ramondre, has to hold on to the ball, right? Ball protection is going to be huge. Has to stay on the field. Those have been the big two bugaboos with Ramondre Stevenson in recent seasons. But, I understand the contract is not great, especially now that he might not even be like the featured back, even if he is the early down guy. But Ramondre is still a quality running back, and he's lost weight, so maybe there's more explosiveness to his game. Adds something that really has been the main knock outside of the ball security and the availability stuff. I guess availability hasn't really been a knock. It's been some unfortunate stuff for him. But either way, people kind of, give him crap for the fact that he's not exactly a home run hitter. Even though he's got a bunch of long touchdowns in his career, you're not expecting him to go from like the Patriots territory and score from there. So maybe losing, the 10, 15 pounds is helpful in adding that to his game as well. But I love that 1-2 punch. And Antonio Gibson is a guy who needs to show more in pass protection. He was a bit up and down there last year, and he's also got to hold on to the ball better than he did last year. It just didn't really show because he didn't lose as many. He did cough it up a few times, though. But the same type of, guy who can do everything, he can split out wide, catch passes out of the backfield, run the ball as well, and be very dynamic and effective there. But he's more explosive than a Ramondre Stevenson. He's kind of that in-between of Travion and Ramondre, even though I think he's closer to Travion Henderson. So it's a stacked backfield, man. And, even if somebody isn't able to go 1 week, you still have a 1-2 punch that I think opponents are going to be pretty intimidated by because of the versatility and the home run potential that they bring.
So is this a room that you think, again, even though there's inexperience with Travion Henderson, there's two vets there. Like, are they going to be able to truly rely on this room to run their offense through? And do you think like, is this like for lack of a better term, like a hidden weapon for this team. Because I feel like when you talk about run games across the NFL, you don't really think of the Patriots, but I feel like they can be really dynamic and kind of run 2 back sets, 1 back set, split out Henderson, and sort of really be like not just a running back room with Travion, but like an entire new dynamic offense here. It feels like I'm really optimistic about what they have in the backfield.
I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. Like Antonio Gibson's out of here saying that they have one of the best backfields in the league, which I agree with. And everyone knows McDaniel's history with running backs. So I think after seeing what Travion Henderson was doing, anybody who looks at this running back depth chart is going to be like, oh, wait a minute, these guys might be a problem because everybody can do everything. And still TBD on Ramondre and just how explosive he is. But Antonio Gibson and Travion Henderson are 2 guys who can take whatever space you give them and really make you pay.
All right. Well, that is the running back room. We have 2 more reasons for concern, 1 more reason for optimism to get to. But first, I got to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time. Let's talk about how excited we are for this football season, because we are super excited. The Patriots play this coming Sunday at Gillette Stadium, and you can get tickets to the game right now on the Game Time app. The app gives the advantage back to fans. It is the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences, and it is done only in a few taps. Fees are always included as well with their upfront pricing, so you always see what you pay and you won't get charged with hidden fees on the back end. The app is incredibly easy to use, and they have the Game Time guarantee, which means you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. You can also customize your spot, which allows you to see a field view from the arena and where you're going to be. And they also have zone deals that save you even more money when you choose a section and let Game Time choose your seats. So take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS, and you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, well, let's look at the Game Time app right now, Taylor. And we will look at Patriots at Raiders. And the upfront price has already dropped $4 from yesterday's show, meaning that you can get into Gillette Stadium on Sunday for as little as $204. Now, that may sound expensive, which maybe it is, depending on your price range, but it's opening weekend. It's a new era. It's Mike Vrabel, Drake Maye, and it's game 1. Those prices, frankly, will drop from now until kickoff on Sunday. So maybe you want to wait it out and see if you can get a better price. But they're also going to drop throughout the season because week 1 is obviously a big ticket item. So you get in right now for $204. But if you want to wait till week 3, week 4, do it with the Game Time app, the best place to get last-minute tickets. Use that code CLNS, and you will get $20 off your first purchase, and terms apply as always. All right, I figure since we've gone optimism and concern back and forth here the last couple times, Taylor, let's hit the last 2 reasons for concern so we can end the show on a high note on the other end. And we will start with tight end and what the depth situation is there, because I think we all agree that Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper is a solid 1-2 punch, but there's not much behind them at all. And if you look again at that depth chart we just talked about, they're actually listing Jack Westover as a fullback now. He changed his number this morning. He's number 37. He's listed as the fullback. He ain't no tight end, and they haven't really used him there much at all this summer. So what do you make of it? What do you make of that position change, and also just what they have or what they don't have in the pipeline at tight end?
The last 2 concerns are going to be pretty quick. I mean, it's what they don't have. We know what Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper bring. We like them as veteran, security blanket types who can excel in the red zone and as chain movers. Jack Westover, he has the right attitude and I think intelligence to play fullback, but he just doesn't have the play style that I like to see from a Josh McDaniels fullback, and what I think ideally Josh McDaniels would want as a fullback. And while Westover being able to play a bunch of different positions is very valuable, he just doesn't move the needle for me, to be very honest. Hopefully he proves me wrong, but him being your third guy isn't very inspiring, and neither is CJ Dupree on the practice squad, to be very honest, because we didn't really notice him at all this summer. I was hoping they would claim somebody. They haven't. In tight end, if there's a room that you don't mind being one of the worst on your team, it's tight end, because it's so rarely do you find somebody who actually fills what the role is versus just being either a big receiver or, a small offensive tackle or what have you. But that's really what it is. I think they're solid up top. They're fine at their third position, but if Austin Hooper or Hunter Henry were to go down, I would feel more comfortable using like Mac Hollins as a pseudo tight end in some of your 2 tight end packages than necessarily going to Jack Westover. Maybe they signed somebody like Cole Fotheringham, is a guy that I liked this preseason, was a little bit surprised he didn't come back on the practice squad. I don't know if he signed with somebody or not, but you're hoping that maybe he's around or something, because I just don't know that they have a lot of developmental talent on this roster at tight end, and the veterans are on the older side. So you're hoping that they can stay healthy and on the field, but I do worry if either one of them goes down, what that position looks like and how that limits what you can do on offense.
All right, now talk to me about kicker, because that's the other reason for concern here. And tie goes to Andres Borregales. Tie goes to the rookie. That's what it felt like. But they started off super strong, and then they fell off. So I ask you, yes, we're nervous about the rookie and the shaky end of the summer he had. If it goes poorly down the stretch of the season, do they make a quick change? Where are you at with kicker, and how concerning can this be for this team who, again, you'd think they're going to be competitive in games, but they're probably going to be pretty close games, and you're going to want to have a kicker on your side to make sure that those close games can come out in your favor.
I think they ride with him until he loses the job, unless he's losing them games.
Right.
You kept the rookie kicker. It is what it is. And the concern for me, obviously, he is a rookie. There's been the inconsistency where we've seen some pretty rough days from him, was almost automatic early in the summer. And then both he and Parker Rummel were a bit inconsistent after that. So it's just not, and Patriots fans have been used to by now, the young kicker or the 1-year kicker. Joey Sly was a nice little breath of fresh air after the Chad Ryland year, but you're just hoping it's not like what happened with Chad, where he just really seems to get in his own head and kind of fall apart. Hopefully he's able to get some level of confidence and prove us wrong and be one of the Patriots' better rookie kickers that we've seen, but we just really don't know. And I don't know that his summer was necessarily strong enough for me to consider this a position of strength. At best, I think it's just a massive question mark.
All right, and last but not least, our final reason for optimism here on the Patriots Daily. Top reasons for optimism and concerns ahead of the Patriots 2025 season. It's wide receiver diversity. I'm curious about your thoughts on this and kind of why you called it diversity versus where they are top to bottom and depth, because it's not, I want to say it's kind of a deep position, but as we've talked about, there's still no number one. And that's the big problem, I think, here for a while. But they do have a lot of guys that can play a lot of different positions. So talk me through the wide receiver room, what you see from them, and again, why they can be a strength in this offense instead of a weakness without a real high-end, top-tier pass catcher in football.
So I guess I didn't say depth because, when I say that, people always bring up, they don't have the true number one receiver, and that's fair. Sure. So I say diversity because while you could also argue that their skill sets are a bit redundant, you do have a lot of guys that are short to intermediate, they all bring something specific, where Mac Hollins brings size they don't really have anywhere else. Stephon Diggs brings a level of route running and savviness that they don't really have anywhere else. Demario Douglas brings you a level of explosiveness and after the catch ability. Kayshon Boutte just being a hyper reliable target where it feels like every pass that goes to him is going to get caught. And when it doesn't, you actually get kind of surprised. And then the rookies, Kyle Williams, you're hoping that he continues to show what he did this summer. At the catch point, that was a bit inconsistent, but the dude was getting open. His quarterbacks just weren't really helping him out. Hopefully he brings that vertical element where it really ties everything together and everybody else is able to do what they do best and really shine. And Efton Chisholm, as I've mentioned before, his skill set is probably one of the more redundant in the wide receiver room because it feels like there's not one specific thing that he does significantly better than anybody else, but he brings a combination of being a yards after catch threat, having great hands, and also being someone that you can involve in the blocking game. That's what separates him, I think, from Demario Douglas, plus he's 2 inches taller, which 5'10" still isn't great, but it gives you a wider catch radius. I think also his ability to catch onto this offense so quickly if anything were to happen to Pop, I wouldn't necessarily be worried about Efton Chisholm having to slide into that role. So I just like that they have different skill sets and ways that they can attack defenses. Whereas in years prior, it's just there wasn't enough experience, there wasn't enough explosiveness, and it's just you didn't like all the different skill sets. It just felt like, oh, they're slightly different versions of the same guy, but not really in a good way. This year, while it's a lot of short to intermediate presences, they all just have one tiny thing, I think, that makes them unique, and you can put them in different spots, move them around the formation, and kind of give defenses a little bit of trouble pre and post snap.
Well, you mentioned the short and intermediate, and then you look at a Kayshon Boutte, who you kind of already mentioned. Like, him and Drake had sort of a rapport there on the deep ball towards the end of the year, down the middle, down the sideline. And you mentioned that Jeff Howe article the other day. I'm reading this from Twitter right now. Kayshon Boutte's offseason was, quote, stunning, according to Patriots management. And that was in the Jeff Howe, in that Jeff Howe piece. Go check it out if you haven't already. Read it on The Athletic. But like, that's a guy who when we did our original post-draft roster projection, we kind of had him on the outs. We didn't know if he was going to make this team. And he has just ascended in this wide receiver room as someone who, again, I mentioned it, but has a rapport with Drake Maye, has turned into someone who was a spotty pass catcher to has one of the more reliable hands in the room. You pair that with Stephon Diggs, who looks healthy, Mac Hollins, who has impressed since he came back from his injury. Kyle Williams is upside. Like, it's a big question mark room, but if it all works out, they could potentially be pretty special in this offense. So again, we'll see what happens, but there is definitely enough there, that they may be able to eke out some wins and actually score some points, in the NFL and for this Patriots season. So again, it is our Patriots reasons for optimism and concerns as a preview of the season ahead of this weekend's Raiders at Patriots game in Foxborough. We will be back here on the channel throughout the rest of the week, continuing to preview this. We just recorded with a very special guest. We'll drop that one a little bit later on in the week, so stay tuned and locked in for that. We'll also be back tomorrow, I believe, with a mailbag. We're going to do a mailbag tomorrow. Perfect. Wednesday mailbag. So ask your questions when Taylor asks for them tomorrow on Twitter. We'll get to that tomorrow at some point after practice. And again, we'll just keep you updated here as we get towards week one and throughout the rest of the season. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to Patriots Press Pass. And as a reminder, we're powered by Prize Picks and Game Time, and gave you those reads earlier. But check it out. Head over there. Use that code CLNS on both sites. You'll get some special offers. Helps them out. Helps us out too. So that, again, is our preview. We will see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will see you very soon. Peace out, everyone.